We enter our programming for breaking news. The verdict for the Jodi Arias penalty phase is in, and it will be read just moments from now. Here's a live look from the courtroom as we await the fate of the convicted killer. You see it's still on the seal there, as they have not brought all of the players into the courtroom just yet. Jodi Arias faces life in prison or the death penalty. Only those two options. If the jury did not reach a unanimous decision, Arias will automatically get life in prison. Now, Arias was convicted of killing her ex-boyfriend, Travis Alexander. The trial lasted 5 months, and the jury found her guilty of first-degree murder. But they could not decide on a punishment, which led to this second penalty phase. Well, that penalty phase started back on October 21st. It spanned just about 4 months, and the case went to the jury on Wednesday. After deliberation, jurors have come to a decision regarding Jodi Arias' fate. I want to give you a little background, though. Arias met Travis Alexander at a work convention in Las Vegas back in 2006. They had a relationship, they broke it off, but continued to see each other intimately. Then in June of 2008, Arias killed Alexander in his home in Mesa. She stabbed him 27 times, slit his throat, shot him in the head. She was arrested about a month later, just days before turning 28 years old. Well, the sentencing retrial went on for 41 days before the case went to the jury. And I want to go ahead and bring in our own Kylie Cruz, who was standing outside of Superior Court and who has been covering this for us for several days now. Kylie, really only two options here. What is the atmosphere outside the courtroom? Well, I think it is telling just of the emotions involved in this trial. There are some people, in fact, I have heard from many in emails and out in the public, who believe that Jodi Arias is a battered woman and doesn't deserve to spend another day in jail. But we never saw any real evidence of that, just speculative evidence of that. And a lot of people were very upset. You know, obviously we see all kinds of strategy in these types of trials, but a lot of people on the Travis Alexander side felt that it was beyond the pale to try to say that he had child pornography on his computer when there was no evidence of that ever found on the computer. And then, of course, Donna, you remember that that's what led to the accusations of prosecutor Juan Martinez's misconduct. They tried to say that he erased all of that from the computer, but that was never proven as well.
Yeah, and the other part of that is that there was no physical evidence that she was physically abused.
Really interesting, though, too, Donna, and I think that you'll also agree, is that she kept a diary during all of this and never mentioned anything about abuse from Travis Alexander in her personal diary, a place where you would think that she would express her most secret thoughts.
Sure, and all that stuff was, of course, presented to the jury.
Very close.
And Jason, you know, and we know, if you go silent, we know it's because you had to run back into that courtroom. But while I have you here really quick, one thing that the defense tried to do is paint Jodi Arias as a woman who had borderline personality. Now, the people at home might be wondering, well, anyone who can commit murder probably has some type of borderline personality. But that is a legal definition, and maybe you can tell me what they were trying to do with that argument.
You know, it's one of the mitigating factors. The judge is back on the bench. I'll touch base with you guys later.
All right, Jason, best of luck to you as he heads back into the courtroom. What we can expect to happen in the next few minutes is Judge Sherry Stevens will address the jury. She will ask for their sentencing verdict. You are looking at the courtroom live right now, so you are now seeing Jodi Arias sitting there with her defense team. Her main defense attorney, Kurt Nurmi, is not in that shot that you are seeing there. Jodi Arias is just turned towards the camera there in the glasses and the brunette hair. She will sit when the jury is ready to deliver that verdict that will be handed to the jury, or to Judge Stevens, and then the jury will read that sentencing verdict, which will be one of two options. They will either sentence Jodi Arias, convicted killer Jodi Arias, to death, or they will sentence her to life in prison. Then we will have another 45-day period where Judge Sherry Stevens will decide whether or not, after 25 years behind bars, Jodi Arias should have the possibility of being released. No one expects that to happen, but it is a possibility. And I want to tell my producers now that if they start to hear any audio, just tell me and I will shut up. But we do have moments away a unanimous verdict from the jury in this sentencing retrial, a sentencing retrial that became necessary because the jury that found Jodi Arias guilty could not decide on her sentence. Let's listen in.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I have received two juror questions from you.
All right, let's recap because this is somewhat of a confusing situation. Earlier today, the Superior Court said that there was a verdict reached. Now, we were led to believe that if they used that language, that meant that there was a unanimous verdict, but that was not the case. The jury came back this morning. It was a hung jury once again, the second sentencing jury that ended up hung. So that means that the death penalty is wiped away and Jodi Arias will spend the rest of her life behind bars. Now, we do know that on April 13th at 8:30 a.m., Judge Sherry Stevens will decide at that point whether or not Jodi Arias should be given the right to possibility of parole after 25 years behind bars. We know that that is something that Travis Alexander's family would not be happy with. They would not find acceptable. His friends have told us that directly. We won't be able to know what is going to happen with that until April 13th, but obviously you know that we will be following that very closely. Now, as that verdict or that hung jury announcement was read by Sherry Stevens, Jodi Arias was very stoic. She didn't show a lot of emotion. She sat there next to her attorneys, sitting with the same look that we have seen her throughout this trial, with straight brunette hair and glasses, listening intently but not showing a lot of emotion. It was completely different on the other side of the courtroom. The family, the friends of Travis Alexander were showing and visibly sobbing, audibly sobbing, very upset that a second jury was not able to reach a unanimous verdict of whatever outcome. That was something that saddened them greatly. Let's bring in Donna Rossi. Donna, I know you've heard exactly what I've heard. What are your initial impressions?
To ask Mr. Montgomery.
Scott, the circumstances in this case were bizarre at times. They were very emotional, salacious. I'm wondering, in death penalty cases, where it is you could definitely argue a crime of passion here, do they normally end in hung juries like this? I know I'm asking you to tap into your wealth of knowledge, but what do you normally see in these crimes of passion?
Well, yeah, I mean, good question there. I mean,
You're looking right now at the Alexander family walking out of the courtroom. You can see our Jason Berry, who's standing in front of them there, trying to get some type of comment, but quite honestly, it doesn't look like they are giving it. They are walking en masse outside, and we'll just see if they stop by this last bank of cameras before they walk to the parking garage. Obviously, very emotional time for them, as they were expecting, as all of us were expecting, that there would be a unanimous verdict. And our Donna Rossi's camera across the street sees the family coming across. Donna, are you still with me? Can you tell me what you're seeing?
I am. We are across the street.
Well, there's fantastic insight from Mr. Cates. And Donna, he said that Jodi Arias didn't appear to be a monster. She didn't seem to be a monster to the jury. But it's time for us to speak to the victim here, Travis Alexander. If people had only watched one day of this trial, they might have come away thinking one way about Travis Alexander or another. But we should say that at many times he was accused of being abusive. He was accused of having child pornography on his computer. He was accused of being a sex addict. None of that was ever proven. All of that was coming from Jodi Arias herself, a woman who has told many, many stories and contradicted herself many times. One thing we can say for sure about Travis Alexander is that he is a man who was murdered by this woman and who was taken from this world too soon. I want to go to Jason Berry right now, who was following Travis Alexander's family as they were coming out of the courtroom. I find it, an interesting aside, Jason, that after the first sentencing trial, Kurt Nurmi didn't want to be a part of this trial anymore. In fact, he and Jodi Arias were at odds at many times, and I believe she tried to fire him at one time. And yet he saved her life twice.
That original trial.
Well, and I think we could give Judge Sherry Stevens a little credit for that, because she decided to not allow the trial to be broadcast live, or we should say the sentencing retrial, to be broadcast live on television or online. However you feel about that, obviously some people might be upset with that decision, but it definitely tampered down, quelled a lot of the craziness of this. Correct, Jason?
Yeah, I did. It definitely watered it down.
All right, Jason, I'm going to allow you to gather and take a breath here for a second while I recap everything that's been going on. Basically, just at 8:30, a little after 8:30 this morning, we were told that there would be a verdict in the Jodi Arias sentencing retrial. We believe that it was a unanimous verdict up until it was read just a short time ago, and let's go ahead and take a listen.
All right, at this time, the court is declaring a mistrial. Are we ready to proceed to sentencing?
That's exactly how it went. In fact, We believed up until that point that the jury would be coming back with either a sentence of death or life in prison, but because the jury was hung, and remember that this is a second jury that was hung, Jodi Arias automatically will be sentenced to life in prison with a qualification to that coming on April 13th. You can hear the family of Travis Alexander, their emotional disappointment with a second hung jury. Let's listen in. Now, as the camera pans to the left, and you can see Jodi Arias is also paying attention to the family that is crying there. That was Travis Alexander's sister. The victim in this case, Travis Alexander, murdered by that woman there, Jodi Arias. That was his sister sobbing openly in the courtroom. And then one of the members of the family, as they were walking out and walking past our camera, said very clearly they hope Jodi Arias burns in hell. Now, we know we're going to be hearing from Maricopa County Attorney Bill Montgomery here very shortly. He is the man who decided to have a second sentencing trial for Jodi Arias. This was not a foregone conclusion. When the first jury who found her guilty of murder could not come to a verdict in her sentence, they were hung as well. The county attorney could have decided, well, we're not going to get a resolution to this case if we did it all over again, so why don't we save the county millions of dollars and not have another sentencing trial? But that was not Bill Montgomery's decision. He decided to do it again, and unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, it came to the exact same result, but it did end up costing the county millions of dollars. Now, we're going to hear from him shortly, and I'm sure he'll talk a little bit about that, and he'll talk about the disappointment for his prosecutors that they weren't able to get a unanimous decision in this trial, and they, of course, were pushing for the death penalty. At times during the trial, the defense attorneys claimed that the prosecutors were committing misconduct, that they had gotten rid of and erased evidence that was on Travis Alexander's computer. But the Judge Sherry Stevens, decided there was no evidence of that there was no misconduct, and they allowed to move forward. Now, we have crews gathering reaction from outside the courtroom. We are going to bring that to you in just moments, but a lot of people have been waiting for this day. Now, when the second penalty phase started several months ago, it picked up very quickly with twists, new strategies, and shocking photos. Some of that evidence was never shown to the second sentencing jury. In fact, what was very interesting and what Jason was talking about a second ago is that it was stipulated. It was just said to the second jury that we know that she is a convicted murderer. We know that she killed Travis Alexander, so we aren't going to get into all of the details, all of the horrible details and the viciousness of this murder, and maybe that played into the fact that they could not reach a verdict, especially the verdict of sentencing her to death. Don, I don't know if you heard that last sentence, but the fact that this jury did not hear a lot of the evidence that the first jury did, do you think that made a difference? You know, Jason, a lot of people will say, well, it doesn't matter if it's 1 or if it's 5, but 11-1 does make a difference, because moving forward, when Judge Stevens has to make a decision as to whether or not she allows Jodi Arias to be eligible for parole in 25 years, when she sees that the jury broke down 11-1, that helps her make that decision, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It could very much have an impact on, and that's what she got.
And you contrast that picture that you described there very graphically with Kurt Nurmi, the defense attorney, saying to those same jurors, do you kill this woman? Do you kill Jodi Arias for what she did on June 4th of 2008? And you know, he only needed to convince one, Jason, and it looks like he did.
Yeah, and really that's all it takes.
If any of the jury members decide to speak to us, and boy, I'll tell you what, it would take a lot of courage for that one juror who held out to speak to the public. It would be fascinating to hear, but if that person does speak to the public, they will do so by only showing their feet. They will not show their faces or any other identifying characteristics, but you will be able to hear their voice and hear what they have to say. And if that is going to happen, Jason, we are hearing that that will happen very shortly. All right, Jason, the jurors are now walking into the jury room, we are being told. I want to see if we can take a live picture. And remember, the camera is on the floor. You will only see their feet, but you will be able to hear their voices. Let's go ahead and listen into the jury room now. Fascinating comments there from the jurors who were for the death penalty, the jurors and the like-minded alternates. So in the arc of this tragedy, in this trial, it was one woman, Jodi Arias, who chose to take the life of her victim, Travis Alexander. And in the end, it was one woman, one juror, one holdout who chose to save the life of a convicted killer.